Hello, I'm Esther Githui. It's Tuesday, May 24th. This is Africa 54.
In Ethiopia's Amhara region, more than 4,000 people have been arrested, including over 200 for alleged killings. In East Africa, severe drought in the region is affecting more than 18 million people. Nigeria's LGTBQ community protests against a bill introduced to Parliament that seeks to criminalize cross-dressing. All this and much more on today's Africa 54.
A state security official in Ethiopia's northern Amhara region says more than 4,000 people have been arrested, including over 200 for alleged killings. David Doyle has more.
Ethiopian authorities have arrested more than 4,000 people in the northern Amhara region, local state media said on Monday, as part of a wider crackdown against militia fighters, critics and the press. Gizachu Mulane, spokesperson for the Amhara Regional Administration, and federal government spokesperson Legesse Tulu did not immediately respond to requests for comment on the wave of arrests. Amhara state security official Desalen Tasu told the Amhara Media Corporation that more than 200 of the suspects were accused of killings. He alleged they had conducted illegal activities in the name of the Fano paramilitary group. It was not clear why the rest were being detained. Amhara forces and the Fano militia backed federal troops against rebellious forces in the Tigray region after fighting erupted there in November 2020. However, relations between some top Amhara officials and central government have since soured. Tasu did not provide any evidence to back up the accusations of killings, and Reuters could not independently verify the claims. On Sunday, a US-based online media outlet said 4 employees had been arrested in Amhara, while the whereabouts of 2 others were unclear. That would add to the reported arrests of 5 journalists at another Amhara media outlet on Thursday. Critics say Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed is cracking down on dissent around Ethiopia. He says he's guaranteeing stability and law and order in the multi-ethnic nation.
David Doyle of Reuters filed that report. Thousands of protesters flooded the streets of Khartoum and its twin city of Omdurman on Monday to denounce the October military coup that has plunged the country into further turmoil. It is the latest demonstration in a long string of protests following the coup which derailed the country's transition to democratic rule. Drought police fired tear gas at protesters in Omdurman while confrontations took place between the security forces and protesters in some neighborhoods. In the past, both live ammunition and tear gas has been used on crowds. The country's internet and mobile signal has also been shut down in an effort to keep people from gathering.
We will keep taking to the streets until we have a full civilian government. There will be no power sharing, no compromise, and no legitimacy to this coup that is still seeking support from the people, and we'll never forget it.
The COP authority and the military leaders seems to have another opinion about finishing this problem, and they are determined to continue killing and bloodshedding of the Sudanese peaceful protesters.
Sudan has been politically paralyzed since the coup, with almost daily protests, and authorities have launched a major crackdown on protesters. For more on Sudan's protest, I'm joined by John Tanza, host and managing editor of the South Sudan in Focus radio program. John, a very warm welcome back to Africa 54.
Thank you, Esther.
First of all, let's start with the internet and the mobile signal being shut down. How will protesters reorganize themselves to be able to continue pressuring the military coup leaders to step down?
I mean, in this digital era, the activists in Sudan have found ways of circumventing if you like, communication blackout. You know, the VPN, a lot of people in Sudan use VPN, and the word of mouth is also, it travels very fast in Sudan. You know, people communicate with one another, and these grassroots civil society groups are well organized. They have been coordinating the protest on a daily basis. And so I don't think any internet blackout will prevent them from coming back to the streets.
John, these protests have gone on for months. And I'm just wondering, what other strategy can the demonstrators employ to pressure these military leaders to move out of power?
Sudanese have been known for toppling their government via street protests. Nimeri was overthrown because of street protests. Ibrahim Aboud was overthrown because of street protests. These people are going to stay on the streets until their demands are met. No, I mean, the question of how long doesn't matter to most activists in Sudan. I mean, the people we speak to say people are fed up. The economic situation has not changed. The coup leaders promised a lot for the Sudanese people, but they are not delivering those promises. And that's why people are saying, enough is enough, go back to the barracks.
So many people have lost their lives. So many people have been maimed. So many Sudanese have left the country because of all this chaos, these protests, and the military leadership in the country. What motivates them to keep going on?
The need for change is one motivation in Sudan, because the Sudanese people were, going through all sorts of life under Bashir's 30 years of rule. When Bashir was overthrown, the common feeling all over Sudan was that change was coming. Change was coming with a lot of benefits, services, and opened the country up to the international community. But they're seeing the opposite, and that's why people are on the streets demanding, asking the military to go back to the barracks.
How has this unrest affected the region, say South Sudan, Ethiopia there, and Egypt?
I mean, Sudan is a main economic hub, business hub for South Sudan, because South Sudan is landlocked. And so any instability in Sudan trickles down to price hikes in the markets. It trickles down to insecurity along the borders. You cannot travel freely. And there are people who have families in South Sudan and some are in Sudan. So it also affects them emotionally. So what is happening in Khartoum has an impact on a lot of people in South Sudan. In Egypt, of course, Egypt is interested in stability along the Nile. Any country along the Nile that is not stable, Egypt will want to come in to make sure that all is good. They can do business as usual.
And the women have been at the forefront, I have to say, of this protest,
Correct.
Including very young.
A lot of women have been in the forefront, and there have been also a lot of crackdown on women activists. For instance, a member of a communist party was just arrested on Thursday in Khartoum after returning from Kauda in the Nuba Mountains. They went and met the leader of the SPLM North, of the Aziz Al-Hilo. So these are continuing crackdown on activists in Sudan.
John, many thanks for your insight. John Tanza is host and of VOA South Sudan in Focus program. Humanitarian organizations are raising the alarm over the situation unfolding in Ethiopia, Kenya, and Somalia as the drought in the region affects more than 18 million people in Kenya. More than 3.5 million people are in need of humanitarian assistance, and numbers there are expected to rise in the coming weeks since the current rainy season has been below average. Mohammed Yusuf traveled to Garissa, one of the drought-hit areas.
Ibrahim Hussein is desperate for water to give to his camels. The previous day, he left this water point without water. I'm yet to get water. Sometimes there's no water, and sometimes there's no fuel to pump the water. Hussein says, it took me 3 hours to get here. Kenya's northern region has received less than a third of the expected normal rainfall. The drought has wiped off pasture and livestock. Livestock herders are forced to camp near water points to save their source of livelihoods. This man lost at least 60 goats to drought. He says the situation is bad. I started to trek with animals late in the night. I got here in the morning. and goat water at 1. Ibrahim says many other people here are waiting for their turn to get water. They will get water at 3, and some will spend the night here, and more people will come in the morning searching for water. Aid agencies warn that the situation will only get worse in the coming weeks, with no hope for rain to provide relief to those affected. In September, the Kenyan government declared the drought ravaging some parts of the country a national disaster. Residents say the assistance being provided is not enough. Officials say they are doing all they can to mitigate the effects of the drought.
We have drilled many boreholes, as many as about 79 in the last 4 years. We have dug many water pans. We will continue to do that. We have been doing water tracking, which we'll continue to do. But the challenges are big. The situation has been very persistent and is getting worse. Climate change is real, and we are direct victims of climate change.
After a few hours of waiting, Hussein got water for his camel to keep them going for a few more weeks. Mohammed Yusuf for VA News, Garissa, Kenya.
At least 50 people were killed by militants on Sunday around the town of Ran in Nigeria's Borno state, in the country's northeastern tip near its border with Cameroon, according to witnesses who spoke to Reuters. Since 2009, Nigeria's northeast and Borno state in particular have been the center of an insurgency led by Boko Haram. Millions have been displaced and some 350,000 people have died from attacks and subsequent humanitarian crises, according to the United Nations. Local residents are blaming this latest attack on Boko Haram. More than 100 people are breathing a sigh of relief after being rescued off the northwest coast of Libya as they attempted to make their way across the Mediterranean Sea to Europe. Africa 54's Paul Ndiho has more.
Libyan Coast Guard officials say boats carrying more than 100 people were rescued off the coast of the Libyan city of Garaburi on Monday. The migrants are from many different countries, including Egypt, Eritrea, and Bangladesh. For many migrants, Libya evokes painful memories of abuse, torture, and trafficking. The dangers are all too familiar for some aboard the Geo Berets, a ship run by the medical charity Doctors Without Borders.
We commonly see stab wounds, bullet wounds, burns even. We've seen evidence of electrocution, lots of beatings with whips and hoses and things like that.
Libya is a significant transit point for Africans seeking to make the odious journey to Europe across the Mediterranean Sea.
I'm entering Libya by catching by traffickers. The traffickers beating electricity something. Looks my face, first of all, and my hands.
Libya is being singled out as a dangerous country for migrants, and a United Nations report revealed that crimes against humanity are being inflicted on the most vulnerable people.
Well, in Libya, there is so much human violence, like capturing people from their main camps, taking them to the prison, trying to ask them money. So it's difficult.
Hoping for a better life, some migrants manage to reach their destinations. Some are rescued, but others often die during their journey to reach Europe. Paul Ndiho, VOA News, Washington.
Let us know what you think about Africa 54 and all our VOA Africa programs on our website at voaafrica.com. Still to come, a health expert sounds the alarm on the rising number of deaths from tobacco consumption. But first, Hedy Adams tells us what's coming up on Wednesday's Straight Talk Africa.
On the next Straight Talk Africa, my conversation with Nobel Peace Prize laureate Dr. Denis Mukwege. He'll talk about his new book, his work helping women caught in armed conflict, and his global campaign to end rape as a weapon of war. We'll also look at the impact of the abortion debate in the United States on countries in Africa and other parts of the world. We'll discuss why terminating pregnancies is not permitted for any reason in 10 out of 54 countries countries in Africa. Join me, Heidi Adams, on the next Straight Talk Africa.
Health, wellness, sport, beauty, medical breakthroughs. Healthy Living cares about your well-being. What are the main health concerns in Africa and around the world? Find out the latest on coronavirus. Connect with our experts and ask them questions.
How long does the virus stay?
Join me, Lina Khmoudou, in Washington, every week on Healthy Living, right here on VOA.
Nearly 5 trillion cigarettes are consumed each year, according to the 7th edition of the Tobacco Atlas. The report released recently by Vital Strategies and Tobacconomics at the University of Illinois in Chicago says in 2019, more than 8.6 million people worldwide died due to tobacco. Africa is seeing increases in tobacco consumption. For more insight, Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Mudu spoke with Dr. Jeffrey Drought, co-editor and author of the Atlas and research professor at the University of Illinois, Chicago.
Countries that have very young populations are very vulnerable to the tobacco industry. And so the tobacco industry is frankly just taking advantage of demographics, and they're targeting very young countries like many in Africa, and also countries where there's a lot of economic growth. And there are a lot of aspiring young people who might think it's cool to smoke, especially if they're convinced through clever marketing. The other issue is the government isn't doing a very good job at actually regulating the industry. And the industry knows this, and it works very, very hard to make sure it's not regulated and to make sure that it has all of the open channels to young people.
What types of regulations are we talking about?
The very most important one is the excise taxes. So those are the taxes that applied only to tobacco products. The higher those taxes, the higher the prices and the lower the consumption. The countries that are raising their taxes, for example, Ethiopia has raised its taxes quite significantly recently. We're seeing a decline in consumption. Smoke-free public places, seeing bans on smoking in bars and restaurants, and denormalizing smoking and other tobacco uses. The other really most important intervention would be a ban on tobacco marketing. The way that the tobacco industry attracts young people to smoking or other tobacco use is through clever marketing. The thing that I see the most in Africa in my work there is through social media. And we have a whole lot of young people looking at their phones, and they're getting bombarded by messages from tobacco companies. And it comes in very clever, nefarious ways, like through TikTok.
One of the findings in this year's Atlas is the fact that there is a growing number of young women smoking. What is the cause?
So young women are being empowered because they're more economically active. They're getting better education. But there's this funny thing when that starts to happen is they're being given the wrong messages in terms of what empowerment looks like. In the tobacco industry, this is the flip side. They are promoting this message that smoking is freedom and empowerment. Female adolescent smoking is greater than male adolescent smoking and greater than adult female smoking. If we don't do something about it, we have a very big crisis on our hands.
How do we move forward? What are some of the recommendations, some of the solutions that would bring about more change in this big picture of fighting tobacco consumption?
Not to sound like a broken record, but the way that we know works the best is raising taxes, because especially young people are very sensitive to price. Another is to try to break the communication between the tobacco industry and these young people, which means being very, very active in terms of banning all types of marketing. We haven't cracked this code yet. It's a tough one, trying to figure out how to interrupt this relationship between tobacco companies and potential customers through social media. I mean, we're seeing it in very subtle, very nefarious ways, and we need to figure that out. And we might need the help of some of these larger social media companies. The last thing I would say is we really need to make sure that our governments are not working closely with the tobacco industry. And this is a pattern that I have also seen in sub-Saharan Africa, where the tobacco industry is quite close to some governments. They've managed to convince them that this is an essential economic sector, and it is not. It is a huge economic loss for our societies, every single one of them. And we really need to do a better job communicating with our governments that this is a dead end.
What about the consumer themselves? How do we empower them to relinquish the habit?
I think that we can actually reach many, many young people through mass media campaigns. I would say it's almost exclusively social media, and communicating with them about the harms of tobacco use. Peer-to-peer discussions are even more effective. In Africa, we don't have a lot of support for quitting. So there are people that use tobacco products, and it's very hard for them to figure out how to get support for quitting through nicotine replacement therapies, through counseling. I've seen some really innovative programs, for example, using dentists in Zambia, because dentists actually can see when tobacco is causing big problems. And sometimes it's as simple as a healthcare provider who is trusted saying to some young person who smokes or uses other tobacco products to say, look, this is a really bad idea. You need to stop. And we really need to engage in areas of the world, like in Africa, where I'm seeing, the greatest threats to young people and to societies. This is entirely preventable. If we could get people to not use tobacco, we're going to have healthier, happier, more productive societies.
That was Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Mudu speaking with Dr. Jeffrey Drought, co-editor and author of the Atlas and research professor at the University of Illinois, Chicago. Members of the World Health Organization have re-elected Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus as Director General by a strong majority for another 5-year term. The vote by secret ballot announced by Ahmed Roble Abdillah from Djibouti at a major annual meeting was seen as a formality since Tedros was the only candidate running. Ministers and delegates took turns to shake hands and hug Tedros, a former health minister from Ethiopia who has steered the United Nations agency through a turbulent period dominated by the COVID-19 pandemic. The president had to use a gavel several times to interrupt the applause. Nigeria's LGBTQ community is protesting a bill introduced in Parliament that seeks to criminalize cross-dressing. The LGBTQ community says the bill, which imposes a punishment of 6 months in prison, would only worsen discrimination and the assaults sexual minorities suffer, including transgender people who dress according to their innate gender identity, not the gender of their birth. Timothy Obiezu has more from Abuja, Nigeria. We want to warn our viewers that this report contains images that some may find offensive.
A risky demonstration by sexual minority groups in Nigeria. The LGBTQ activists are protesting a bill introduced by lawmakers in Nigeria's lower house of parliament last month, seeking to ban cross-dressing. The measure calls for a punishment of 6 months in jail or a fine of about $1,200. This viral footage purporting to show a transgender woman who was beaten and stripped in Lagos began circulating on social media after the bill was introduced. VOA cannot confirm the authenticity of the video or the date it was recorded. LGBTQ activists say they fear the law will prompt more attacks.
What laws like this do is that they basically encourage people to take violence into their own hands. We would have, just like we had after the SSMPA was passed, individuals forming vigilantes and going into people's homes to drag them out because they suspect that they are queer, and then, beat them, murder them.
The cross-dressing bill is an expanded version of Nigeria's Same-Sex Marriage Prohibition Act that punishes gay sex with up to 14 years in prison. While the bill would allow comedians to cross-dress for entertainment purposes, activists say it will worsen the existing violence against non-binary or transgender people. Activist Empress Cookie says she too has been violently attacked.
They started stripping me naked. My parents were like, oh, see, you're wearing he's even wearing a female pant. I was emotionally traumatized. I was drained because at the point I realized I was lifeless.
Public activities by sexual minority groups are outlawed in many African countries where authorities often cite religious and moral reasons. Nigerian religious groups that support for same-sex marriage ban also now support for bill restricting cross-dressing.
We don't know man and man. God didn't create Adam and Steve. God created Adam and Eve.
The cross-dressing bill will undergo several readings in Parliament before it is passed and forwarded to President Muhammadu Buhari for approval. Many LGBTQ advocates like Empress Cookie are hoping he doesn't sign it. Timothy Obiezu for VOA News, Abuja, Nigeria.
Postponed in 2020 due to the global health crisis, Senegal's 14th Biennial of African Contemporary Art is underway in Dakar, with some of the work inspired by the dark times endured over the past 2 years. Ida Mullen has more.
Senegalese artist Fally Seneso takes his inspiration from the chaotic street market outside his studio. But over 2 years of global health crisis, the view from his window has changed. His installation, now filling a 300-square-foot room at the 14th Dakar Biennale, includes collapsing buildings, skeletons hanging next to hybrid animals, and decaying waste that generates heat. It's an apocalyptic vision of what his neighborhood could become, inspired by what So observed as he waited through lockdowns.
In the meantime, I saw nature reacting on this. For example, spiders started weaving webs on houses, birds building their nests, even rainwater reacting. It created a tipping point. I said to myself, we are living at a tipping point. I said to myself that I was going to follow the news because it is time that does the work. So that's why I created this chaotic world.
Expectations have been high for the year's Biennale, one of the continent's oldest large-scale celebrations of contemporary African art. Its return, having been postponed in 2020, is expected to attract 250,000 art lovers to the capital. Among those who saw So's work was Ifoume Dile, who flew in from London for the event.
How long it must have taken him to create this in this space is amazing. It's mind-blowing.
So's pieces are not aimed at critics, but people in his community. He says few in Senegal have access to it. After 2 years of hardship, he hopes his scenes of everyday life will give audiences a reason to laugh, whilst also engaging in the deeper meanings. Ida Mullen, VOA News.
That's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.